Hey folks, Fernando doing another video for the Modern Survivalist, and I just want to share a few stories of what we were talking about just right now with my family, with my wife and my oldest son, about well, what you see here, the 2001 economic crisis of Argentina. Here, this is in Spanish, but it says 20 years of the corralito. The corralito is a word like a corral, you know, like a gate. The corralito was a gate around the banking system by which you could not access your own money from the banks anymore. It was no longer yours to take. It was taken from you by the banks. The same banks that are, you know, all over the world and pretty much functioning along with the rest of the elites so as to take from you and give to them. It's a redistribution of wealth directly into the pockets of the elites, as we all know, right? At this point, this is all quite obvious. But yeah, three things that changed Argentina since the 2001 crisis, since the grave economic, political, and social crisis of 2001. That's a great point, because it was, and I've said this before so many times, it was not just an economic crisis, it was a political crisis and a social crisis as well. In fact, it would be, rather than a crisis, it's a full-blown political collapse, because when you see your president resign and the vice president assumes as president, and he resigns as well, and three more following presidents resign, and you go through 5 different presidents in a week because none of them wants to stick around for what they see happening, then that's not a political crisis. That's a political collapse. An economic collapse as well, when you're no longer allowed to access your money. You know, it's taken away from you, converted to a devaluated peso that's worth 1/3, 1/4, and right now it's 1/100th of what it used to be, or nothing. It's really worth nothing in comparison to what you used to have before. They just stole your money, and once a country goes down this, when you default on your national debt as an entire nation, yeah, that is very much not so much a crisis, but a collapse. And you're seeing a lot of these things happen, just starting to happen. That's why I want to do this video. By the way, guys, before I go on, remember to subscribe to the channel and click on the notification bell button. Lots of the topics that I'm often asked about, I've been doing this channel for so many years. There's probably a video addressing one of your concerns or some of the things you probably want to know of. Also, I just did a little video about a movie that I liked yesterday in Netflix called Black Crab. It's not fantastic, but it's worth watching. And also about Star Citizen, the video game I've been playing lately that I like quite a bit. You have the links following that below in the description of the video. You also have the links for my books, of course, very related to this, Surviving the Economic Collapse, based on just this experience that I'm explaining here, and Street Survival Skills. Both of these, and this one too, available in Amazon. So what we're talking about with my son was that given everything going on, you see the war in Ukraine, you see the inflation, people freaking out because of gas prices, because of shortages, price of food. Inflation is slowly, doing its thing, grinding away at your quality of life. And Americans are only starting to see the tip of the iceberg of this. It gets a lot worse. Without being dramatic, it's simply what it is. The facts are out there for us to see. If you're worried about the price of gas, yes, I get it, but that's nothing, man. You have no idea yet. Keep in mind, in terms of the war in Ukraine, this was like less than a month ago, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, is it? This is just getting started. Do you have any idea what you're gonna be seeing a year from now? Do you have any idea? Of course you don't. Of course, how could you? You have no idea how this is gonna be destroying your life. You just have no clue, because you haven't experienced this. I mean, I could write a book about it, as I did. You can read it, but until you actually go through it, you can't know how it affects absolutely every little thing. We were talking about how people ended up eating rats, dogs, cats. The desperation, the economy gone to hell. The savings, if you had savings, those are not available for you anymore. If you had money, I mean, I'm talking about the guy that had maybe $100,000 in the bank. all of a sudden you cannot access that anymore. All of a sudden you also got fired. So you went from having a job and having 100K in the bank, having actual savings, which is not very common for people in the United States these days. But you're going from having your life, your job, your savings, you have everything. All of a sudden you get fired, and no, the money you had in the bank, that's not available anymore. And there was no, back in the day in 2001, there was no social welfare of any kind in Argentina. You had nothing. You didn't have any handouts, nothing at all. That is all very much new in the broader context. You didn't have any food coupons or anything like that, which you did have. Even back then in the United States, it was fairly common. We were on coupons, and for us in Argentina, we looked at coupons on what? When you get handouts, you get a paper, and you go and change that for food. Okay, that sounds cool for someone that's very poor. Makes sense. I see how that could be a lifesaver for someone in that situation. None of that existed in 2001. Now you have an entire network of corruption that's supposed to be social welfare, when in fact people that actually need it have none of that, because it's all going through different channels, and there's always bits taking away, and as corrupt as everything is. But my point is, back in those days, when you looked at 25% unemployment, seized bank accounts, inflation through the roof, you had lots of desperate people. And people would do anything. I was just telling my son that there was this river in one of the second largest city of Argentina. It's called Córdoba. In Córdoba capital, the capital city of the province of Córdoba, it's a river going through a city. And I used to live there for a few years. And it used to be like a nice place. You had like a park and, ducks and whatnot. Just as soon as things started getting bad, those ducks went away. They ate them up. In just a matter of days, no ducks anymore in any park, in any pond. Even stray cats and dogs, pigeons shot for eating. They pretty much wiped out the hare population. Wild rabbits, hares, anything that could be caught and eaten, they would eat anything. And I remember when I first saw the first news, on the news about people eating rats on the streets. People eating rats. I saw this article. It says rats, frogs, cats, horses to eat in a neighborhood in Argentina. This is from Quilmes. Quilmes is very close from where I lived in Argentina, in Banfield. That's the southern suburbs of Buenos Aires. And man, the entire country is like that. It's actually the exception, because Quilmes is not a particularly bad or rough or tough place. Sure, you have very much poverty there, like in most other areas, but it's not one of those. It's not like Fuerte Apache or some of the villas miserias, the shanty towns where you had like miles, square miles of just shacks and little huts built with cardboard or pieces of metal or scrap. It's like a Mad Max town, but those are some of the more where you see the more extreme poverty. Quilmes, man, you had some nice areas in Quilmes. That's not terrible, but you would see this people. And this is an article. I was just checking this out. This is from 2006. So the crisis of 2001 extended to till this day. You still see the country was a breaking point in which you stopped being who you used to be, and all of a sudden you become something else. It used to be that Argentina was of all of Latin America. And sure, you have, it's not, but of all Latin America, Argentina used to be the place, the country that was above all of its neighbors, without a doubt. And it was one of the things that created quite a bit of resentment, because people from Argentina had this air of superiority, unearned, and kind of snobbish at some point, pedantic, pretty much a crappy reputations Argentines among their peers in Latin America. But there was something, there was a root cause for that. At some point, it was a country that was better off than most of it, if not all of its neighbors. You would back in the day, you would look around and the quality, the standards of living that you had in Argentina were definitely above the rest of the countries of the region. The education level was, fairly good, accessible. You had great public universities that even people from, and it's even this day, you have people from neighboring countries go to study to the universities that you have in Argentina. They are a shadow of their former self. That's very much a fact. But it used to be, considerably better. It used to be that they looked up to you, and now that's really no longer the case. I mean, in some areas, people still appreciate lots of the things that the country has to offer. Economically, though, you look at Chile, you look at Brazil. Brazil would have been a much bigger economy, but the quality of life, what would be the average middle class standard of living was definitely above the rest. And that was noticeable, and it was a source of pride for many of us. That is, something I was taking away since 2001, when your people start eating rats, cats, and dogs on the streets because they cannot feed themselves anymore. Lots of things change, man. Lots of things that you used to see in other places. I've said so many times, we used to have, it wasn't exactly a safe country compared to some of the safest countries in the world, but it was definitely better that, the rest of Latin America. It used to be that kidnappings were the kind of thing that happened in Colombia or some other part of Central America or Brazil. All of a sudden, you start seeing these things happening around you. And it used to be that, one of the few cases of kidnappings before 2001 was the case of Mauricio Macri, who later became mayor of the city of Buenos Aires and then president of the country. But he was kidnapped by cops, by active duty cops, and it became a nationwide news, and I think it was like an international event. People were talking about this all over. It was a big thing because it was fairly uncommon. You just didn't see this. All of a sudden, they start taking kids out of the street because they were using a school uniform from a private school. And that means that the parent has some money. So you snatch a kid because of his uniform and ask for a few bucks or a few $1,000 or whatnot. See what you can get from it. That's the kind of thing that simply did not exist. And if you had told anyone that that would be the way it would be just a few months or a couple of years later, it would have sounded crazy. That made no sense. Yet it did happen. And the same way with this stuff about eating cats, dogs, and rats. It's not a delicacy. It's not like you're eating a dog in China or wherever it is that they have. But yeah, this is from 2006. I'm reading here, poverty reached 40% in Argentina. Now poverty, the official number, which is pretty much bullshit, is 60%. Reality, pretty much 80 to 90%, depending on what exactly is middle class standard of living for you. It's really way lower than 10% of people in Argentina live comparable, middle class standards of living compared to, first world countries. That's just the way it is. The rest, they just barely get by with whatever they can. And one of the other images that I've mentioned before and still is people eating out of the garbage, but not just, some homeless bum drug addict. No, seeing an entire family, like a, husband and wife and 2 kids, sitting around. That's one of the things that I remember very vividly. Taking out the garbage from my house, I just let it, take it out, and you look through the window, you see a guy that picks it up, opens it, and they sit around a garbage bag to see what they can eat out of what you just took out. And they're not crazy, they're not drug addicts, they're probably people that found themselves in that situation, and there's nothing. There's no food coupons, there's no nothing, there's no social aid of any kind, there's just extreme poverty, and there's a shock of all of a sudden you were good, you had your job, you had it, all of a sudden you have nothing. All of a sudden you're done, and you just have to go and find whatever you can eat. And this is why, at least for me, preparedness became not so much a cool fancy thing of bushcrafting and doing cool stuff on YouTube. I mean, I love it, like just like you do. But that is for me what modern survivalism is, what realistic survival is. What you're seeing in Ukraine right now. You're in your country, you're getting bombed to pieces. Sure, you're in Russia and your benevolent dictator becomes a not so benevolent dictator anymore, and you're in fear of your life if you don't fall along with the narrative. That's pretty crappy too. That's very much like Venezuela, which coincidentally allied with tyrants and dictators find themselves connected by a same ideology. So yeah, there's that link of what you see in Venezuela, what you see in a place like Russia right now, where you are under the thumb of a dictator. You see what Cristina Kirchner wanted to do with Argentina, converting into Argenzuela, a combination of Argentina, Venezuela. Cristina Kirchner, Maduro in Venezuela, her strongest ally, and that's the plan that they had for it. Maybe culturally it wasn't as easy to go along with it because, I'd like to think that people would resist a dictator a bit more than in some other parts, given that you were, having been through a country that suffered a military dictatorship not that long ago. The tolerance would be less, but you never know. People put up with all sorts of crap. Look at what's happening all over the world. No one can point the finger at anyone and say, haha, look at what, because every single one. Look at what's happening in the United States. Look at what happened in Canada, where you're not allowed to have a peaceful protest because you have a dictator like Trudeau, very much like his probable dad in Cuba, just shutting it all down, taking away people's banks account because they peacefully protest against something that shouldn't have been happening in the first place. Look what's happened all over Europe. Austria, a country that you would look at and say, damn, Austria, that's a fine country. Yeah, until you're forced to have a medical procedure against any decency or any basic human right, you're being stripped away from you. In Australia, there's no place that can say, we've got it. We didn't fall like everyone else. And this is just getting started. We just finished with an initial stage, if you want, of 2 years of what we all know went down. And some of the narrative is changing little by little. What used to be conspiracy theory ended up becoming theory, and it's now an actual reality that finally some are, admitting. But this is not going to be getting better anytime soon. You're going to be seeing lots of these things that I've saw before. You're going to be seeing a collapse of your standards of living, of your even your basic identity as an American is going to be changing with all of this. You're going to be seeing poverty like never before. If there's one thing you need to understand about inflation, inflation is poverty and misery. That's what inflation is. It's not about some dumbass on CNN or Fox or any other that don't care anymore. No matter what you're looking at. It is about destruction of your basic standards of living that you used to take for granted. That's slowly being destroyed. Sometimes in certain aspects, a bit more accelerated. People freaking out over gas. You have any idea how worse this is going to get? This will get, rather than how much you're paying for a gallon of gas. Let's have this conversation again when you can no longer afford food, which is a reality that I've seen firsthand in people. People begging me for a job. At 20 little else year old me, having a grown man pretty much crying and saying, hey, anything, do you have any kind of job? I don't have nothing. What? I wish I could help you with something. I have nothing. But that's the kind of desperation you see in people when this ends up happening. Okay, guys? So, as always, see you on our next video. If you're interested in all this, again, my books, fantastic. Go for them, buy them. I'm pretty sure these will help you out. But the channel itself is full of information that I've been, working on this for years. I think over like a decade. I don't know. Very long time. Guys, take care. See you on our next video.